Welcome, everyone, to Authenticity with Alicia, the podcast where we explore burnout, the pressures of society, and our quest for identity and authenticity. I'm Alicia, and today we are joined by one of my good friends, Addison Coates. She's a newly licensed professional counselor in Oklahoma. She works with folks, she loves working with younger folks from 9 to 16, especially around anxiety, depression, and family relationships. So, thank you for the work that you are doing. And you're also just generally passionate about decreasing mental health stigma. And so I'm super excited for our conversation today. Thank you so much for being here, Addison.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such a sweet introduction. I appreciate it.
So I always like to just I don't know why, it's just my thing. It's always like if I know someone ahead of time, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is how I know someone. But we used to work together. And this is like a
Yes.
little
What?
reunion because we used to
Yeah.
do when COVID first started, Addison and I were working at the same youth organization, and we both are very passionate about providing services, doing outreach. And during that time, we used Facebook and kind of did like live discussions around mental health
Yeah.
topics. So this is like a little
This is
reunion.
yeah. Coffee with the counselor reunion is happening, and I'm really excited about it.
This is 2.0. I love it. So, congratulations on getting newly
Mm,
licensed.
thank you.
How was that process?
I It was this really slow, but then once it was over, seemed really fast. I
Yeah.
was like, it took me 2 years. I
Mhm.
started working as an LPC candidate in November of 2021. And then the December uh, board meeting in
Wow.
2023 was licensed. And so just right at the 2 year mark. And
Yeah.
so 2 years, and I'm very grateful for a lot of like specific things in that process. The first one was I was very blessed to work in an agency that pays for supervision,
Oh,
and so to have the financial kind of burden of supervision lifted off was really nice.
yeah.
And then also the supervisor I had took a very, I want to say different. Not that I had anything to compare it to, but only because, like, when I was talking to people about supervision, they would be like, "Whoa, my supervisor didn't have us do that." And I'm so
Oh,
grateful for the things she had us do. One of them being, "Hey, this is your time to really like sample a lot of things, right? You got a sampling in grad school, and now you can get kind of another sampling, but I really want you by the end of your journey to licensure, choose a theory or two that you really want to dig into because
mm,
there's so many different options, as you
yeah.
know, of modalities and theories that we're going to use to inform our practice. And she really honed in on that. And so she had us do, research and presentations about the different theories we wanted to use and the tapes we were presenting. That's one of the things she kind of assessed for is how are we integrating this theory at different developmental levels? Because I do right now work with ages like up 9 up to 18. And so there's a big difference of using, attachment theory and internal family systems, which were my kind of two that I gravitated toward with a 9-year-old than with an
Oh,
18-year-old. And
1000%.
so, yeah, it's such a good teaching moments. And then she also did group supervision for some of ours, which I really appreciated because at the agency I'm at, you do have folks who work with both, but we're primarily either, you know, 6 to 18 if you're not on the infant mental health side or adults. And so it was really
Mm,
nice to have like that cross sampling of like, oh, I'm getting to hear the adult clinicians and kind of
yeah.
diagnoses and things they're dealing with versus for me, especially I work in a lot of schools. And so diagnoses presenting themselves in a school setting is much different than, an adult out in their day-to-day life or at work. And so I was very grateful for the difference in perspective I got to have with group,
Yeah.
and then also the emphasis on pick a theory and own it. Like now I know kind of where to focus when I'm in the car and I have some extra time, and I'm like, I know what kind of podcast I'm going to listen to today
Oh,
because
I
I'm
love
really
it.
like still internal family systems and attachment are my two
Those are
kind of
great.
passions. And
Yeah.
so it was really cool to internal family systems was like kind of the one I originally chose. And then my supervisor, my LPC supervisor, was really big on attachment. And so through her, I became passionate about it. And then just learning about how they work together
I was
so
gonna say
well,
they
the two
blend
of them.
together super well. So, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I'm just like picking up on
Yeah.
so many good nuggets you're saying though. So, like the first thing that stands out to me is so first of all, for folks who don't know, like we go to master, we get our masters
Yes.
in a type of counseling degree, and we're like our journey's not over yet. We have to do like 2+ years of
hmm
like clinical work, supervision, all this fun stuff. And
Yeah.
what I think some people may feel a pressure to like immediately pick something like, oh my gosh, I graduated. I have to be an expert in this thing. I have to almost like prove myself that I'm like
Mhm.
worthy of this license. And we have a lot of imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
a lot of doubt. And I love that your supervisor gave you this permission to be like, hey, we're still in a learning phase. Like, it's okay to start working towards becoming this like master and expert in one of these things. But let's play around and like really find something
Yeah.
that works for you instead of like forcing or putting a pressure on that early phase in that journey. So I think that sounds so helpful.
Yeah, I definitely lucked out, and yeah, I think too, even if you do kind of become the expert in it, it's trial and error in
Yeah.
anything you apply. And so there have been sessions where I was like, all right, I'm gonna use this theory, and I come in, and I'm sure you've been there where you get met with a total blank stare.
Mhm.
You're like, what did you
Yeah.
like? What are you saying? And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, we need to rework how we're communicating this. And so I really loved the grace that was given in the
Mhm.
feedback of like, okay, because with attachment, she's was very well versed in like those developmental stages. And so it really helped me understand like, oh, okay, the way I'm describing this or implementing it for this age group might work better with this one. So yeah, I appreciated the grace because
That's awesome.
yeah, I 3,000 hours later is you have 3,000 hours of the licensure process. When I think a lot of my family too thought when I graduated, they were like, "You're a counselor." And I was
Right.
like,
Kind
"Kind
of.
of." And so, yeah, and those 3,000 hours are a very useful time. And
Mhm.
so it's a long time, but very much
You did it. You
I had
did
a
the
lot of,
dang thing.
yeah, yeah, it was a huge milestone for sure.
Yes. So for folks who don't know, like, I mean, I know this isn't like a formal quiz, we're not, a research paper, but like, how would you describe internal family systems and attachment for folks who may not be familiar with those?
I love this question and I so appreciate it
Yay.
because I'll do internal family systems first because that was the first thing I was drawn to. And the reason I was drawn to that when she was like, let's start honing in on theories is because I little soapbox, I'm sure you feel like it's important too, as helping professionals to be helped by another helping professional. So I'm in individual therapy myself. And that was the theory that my individual therapist used with me. And I really
Yeah.
related. So internal family systems is basically because I came in with a lot of kind of internal conflict of I think this way. Like it's really great. I'm sure later down in our conversation we'll get to talking about boundaries. And when it comes
Mhm.
to setting boundaries, for me, there's a lot of internal like, I want to say this, but I'm also
Mhm.
worried about this. Like there's a
Mhm.
part of me that, and then there's a part of me that thinks this.
Mm.
And so when I started bringing up, like, I just feel like there's always a board meeting happening up here
Yes.
to my individual therapist. And she was like, let me tell you about internal family systems. And I was like, okay. And so internal family systems is this, theory that basically states that we are all born with parts. We come
Mm.
into this world with parts of us that are good.
Mhm.
The book I'm reading right now, I'm starting with No Bad Parts by Richard Swartz, who's the kind
Oh,
of
good.
founder of internal family system. And basically what it is we have these good parts of us, and then through different wounds, a relationship wound, a parental wound, those parts take on different roles to protect us. And so the
Yeah.
things that we're doing, those parts of us think that they're helping us and they might be in that moment. And then
Mhm.
long term, it is creating things that are actually harming us or negative habits. For example, if I work with a lot of self-esteem. I work with a
Mm.
lot of young girls and their self-esteem. And so sometimes I have girls who come in and are like, my brain is telling me, there's a part of me that's saying, don't eat. And I'm
Mm.
like, okay, let's talk about that. And so I
Mhm.
end up finding out through this exploration of these things that that part is coming up because at some point on the playground or something, there was a kid who told her she was fat
Ugh.
and that really
Yeah.
hurt.
Yeah.
And so, these parts of us take on these different roles. And when my individual therapist told me about the three kind of main roles they have, right? We have these exiles. That's the part of her that was wounded,
Yeah.
right? The younger, vulnerable, wounded parts. That's the part of her that has her feelings hurt, that
Yeah.
feels
Heck
like,
yeah.
maybe I'm fat. And so then we have the managers who are like, that was really painful. I don't
Mhm.
want, because that's what our parts are doing. They're always trying to protect us. And so
Protect.
I don't
Yeah.
want her to have to feel pain anymore.
Mm.
So that's the part saying, don't eat, right?
Yep.
If you just can stay skinny, you won't have to deal with the pain of hearing that
Mm.
you're fat again. And
Mhm.
then, but life is going to activate those exiles at some point,
Mm.
right? Like she's going to, maybe someone makes a comment, maybe she tries on a pair of jeans and it's
Yeah.
too tight. And then it's like that exile comes up and she's in pain. So then we have the firefighters who come in. These firefighter parts are the ones that I work with a lot, because those are
Oh,
the ones that are presenting to people.
yeah.
People see our firefighters and our managers a lot. The firefighter parts can be, oh man, it's usually the negative coping skills that we see.
Mhm.
It's our firefighters that are, yelling or storming out or
Right.
harming ourselves or using drugs and alcohol. Like,
Mm.
because those are the things, like we think of a fire, even if it's just, my individual therapist told me to ask myself at one point, is the house on fire or
Mm.
is there bacon burning in the oven? And my
Ooh.
firefighter and our parts don't know the difference, but they're like
No.
spraying everything and the whole
Yeah.
house is soaked when it was just the oven. If I could
Right.
just have sprayed the oven, but our firefighter parts are usually just coming in and it's
Yeah.
an emergency. It's
Yeah.
we gotta
That
shut this pain down
temporary immediate
immediately.
relief. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so internal family system is the process of getting to know those
Mm.
parts and taking that burden off of them, of feeling like, I'm getting to know that part of her right now and
Yeah.
working with her on kind of taking that burden off of, that part's doing it's the best it can by
Yep.
telling you not to eat. And it's also hurting you, but that part
Yeah.
doesn't know it's hurting you until
Right.
we go in and have that conversation.
Mm.
And so it's really looking at those parts and lifting, the burdens that they have. And
Yeah.
then as far as internal family systems and attachment, I just love because attachment is the idea that this early, early, early period of our life has such a huge impact on how we show up in relationships. I
Mhm.
was listening to another podcast the other day, with some other, mental health ladies that I love. It was Glennon Doyle's podcast, her We
Oh,
Can Do Hard Things podcast.
yes.
And she had Dr. Becky Kennedy on there, who I just love, and they were talking about attachment, and she actually shared some things with me that I was like, whoa. So
Mm.
she said when we're born we come out 25% wired
Mm.
already, like and then by 3 years old we're at 75%. and
Mhm.
so attachment is saying the way our caregivers show up for us in those times is so crucial because it really impacts what we're taught is okay and not okay.
Yeah.
And that comes out in our relationships later on.
Yeah.
And so it's such an honor and a privilege now to work with parents because sometimes I share that and they're
Mhm.
like, oh, that was a really tough part of our lives. And I'm
Yeah.
like, here's the beauty is having the knowledge of attachment style. I use it to really foster empathy with parents and be like, yeah, we can't go back and change the past.
Mhm.
And it's understandable that you thought, oh, they're two, they're not gonna remember.
1000%. Yeah.
Exactly. And therapy, good therapy, I think is a rewiring process.
Yes.
Is a let's go find where let's find the root and
Mhm.
then kind of rewire from there. And so attachment, theory basically says how our caregivers interacting with us is how we are going to learn to attach and form relationships with others.
I love
And
what you
so
said
it's
too of like even though, all these early experiences and early ages, like so much of our brain is wiring and we're learning kind of like these different behaviors and patterns. You
mhm,
said like this word rewire. And,
mhm,
like as humans, we are resilient and our brain has what's called plasticity, so it can rewire. I mean, it's hard work,
yeah.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it and be like, "Oh yeah, you
No.
just, do 1 hour therapy and,
Yeah, just come
everything's
on
all
in for
good."
one session with me and
Right,
no.
but it's
Take time.
possible, and so it's like, even if
Mhm.
we have these really, tough, impactful early experiences, it's knowledge that, like, okay, it's not like something's wrong with me, like, I'm not
Mm-mm.
people use the word crazy, it's sometimes a label that we put in our own heads. I don't use that word, but, like,
Yeah.
that's what we often will tell ourselves, and it's like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like, I'm broken or I'm stuck like this forever," and
Yes.
it's like,
Or I'm at
"Hey."
fault.
Yeah, and
I
it's
think
like, "No,
we
no,
as
no,
humans
like,
are
we
very
can
no.
change, we can
Mhm.
rewire, and, like, we are resilient creatures."
Yeah. That's one of the beautiful things about working with kids is kids are
Mm,
so resilient. and it's using that, and I love all the things you just picked up on because you're right. It's that labeling process,
Ugh,
of crazy, of bad, of us,
yep.
of I messed up.
Mhm.
And it really is like, I love in that kind of podcast they were talking about that attachment does bring a lot of empathy. And I
Mhm.
do help kids find empathy for their
Mm,
parents because
mhm.
that's something that was crucial for me in my therapeutic journey as an individual. And I think empathy without mentioning, no, right? Maybe our parents are not at fault depending on the
Mhm.
situation. And, it's okay to say it's not okay. It's okay to
Yes.
say my parent missed key moments, like is
Yep.
what they were saying. Which I love because, you've got kind of Glennon talking about it. And I love that Dr. Becky comes in and is like, in that podcast, is like, I hear something that you're saying that we're kind of not saying, which is like with the empathy of attachment, we
Mhm.
also have to realize sometimes it's okay to say it's not okay.
Exactly, and
It's
it's like the
okay to
power of "and," right? So we can have
yeah.
empathy and, like, understand the context of, "Hey, let's
Mhm.
think about how they grew up, maybe the
Right.
traumas or the stressors that they experienced," and I believe that, they probably did the best that they could with the information that
Yeah.
they had no ill
Yeah.
intent. And that keyword "and," it may not have been what you needed in those moments. And that's
Right.
okay that you felt hurt or alone or
Mhm.
something. Doesn't mean that they are bad. We're not blaming anyone there. I think that's the beauty of like
Right.
attachment and IFS is we're not trying to like blame, oh, this is this awful person and put these labels elsewhere. It's just, hey,
Yeah.
we have empathy and still acknowledge hurt within ourselves.
Right. And that two things are true and holding those both of those things is such a therapeutic skill because I can't think of any other area sometimes outside of mental health where two things are true. I think we live
Yeah.
in such a society. I mean, think about it in school, right? They're told the answer is four,
Mm-hmm.
right? The answer is North America. Like, there's one answer. And
Yeah.
so I think even just that knowledge of like everything isn't so there's only one answer.
Mm-hmm.
There can be both. There
Yep.
can be acknowledgement, and I love that too about internal family systems is I think um there's so much sometimes the inclination is okay if I'm having these struggles push them down or push them away. And so
Mm-hmm.
internal family system says until we give the exile a seat at the table and say,
Mm-hmm.
man, you coming up, I'm not really comfortable with you. You remind me of some stuff I don't want to look at. But okay, here's your chair.
Mm.
Sit down. We're gonna talk to you and work together because I love the internal family system says, these exiles are like children. I can't think of a child who, is like tugging on the shirt of mom, mom, mom. Like they want that attention and just
Yeah.
saying, nope, like they're gonna keep coming back.
Right.
They're gonna keep saying, "Excuse me, I'm here. I
Yep.
need the attention."
Yep.
And if we can do that for ourselves internally,
Mm.
then we have a chance to kind of do the rewiring process. But the
Mm.
longer we kind of shove and push away, then those exiles are just gonna keep coming back, especially
Right.
when life triggers them and we don't know when that's coming,
Right.
you
And I can
know?
just think of so many people who like they do a lot of hard work. They read the self-help books, they're going to therapy,
Mhm.
they're doing a lot of hard self-reflection and working on change. And if we don't acknowledge that piece, and it's can be really frustrating for people because they're like, what the heck? Like I'm doing all this stuff. Why does these old patterns keep popping up? And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, there's kind of this missing piece that we need to address. And it's
Yeah.
vulnerable, it's scary, it can be, overwhelming at times.
Yeah. It's hard. I think when I think about the type of ingredients I want to have in every session I do, it is the importance of yes, we're looking at the present. Yes, this is what's going on right now. And I think I'm missing a piece if we don't talk about the
Mm,
past. I think I'm
yeah.
missing a piece if we don't talk about the what happened that got us to where we are.
Yeah.
And so it's a key piece. And I know that that's uncomfortable to look at.
Mhm.
I've had people come in, and I'm sure you have too, where they're like, I don't want to talk about my childhood. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm
We're
gonna
gonna
weasel my way in there
yeah,
at
yeah, we're gonna
some point.
bookmark that, we're gonna come back to it. I
Yeah.
love it. No, I have a soft space for IFS as well. I've gone to multiple therapists over the years, and one of mine was an IFS therapist, and I'm not a crier, and so, like, in, like,
Mm-hmm.
my first real session, so, you do a lot of prep work, you get
Yes.
ready to do some of the deeper stuff, and so my first, like, deep session of IFS, I just, like, started crying, and I'm like, where is this
Mm-hmm.
coming from? Like, I'm not a crier. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, this piece feels voodoo-y, but it works. And
It
so
does.
I co-sign
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
It's not magic, but it feels magical.
It does, and I love that because the very first deeper kind of IFS session I did with a client. She cried, and I was like, this is such an honor and a
Yeah.
privilege to be a part of someone's healing. To be
Yep.
a part of that is I'm gonna tear up right now. It's
Aw.
just so meaningful. I just
Yeah.
really always appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you for doing that work. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
IFS it's becoming a really popular thing. Just I think we're really getting to
Hmm.
learn like the importance of all of these things. I'm really excited. And I think using it for like teens is such a validating, empowering thing. So just like thank
Hmm.
you for doing the work that you're doing. You
I
mentioned one of
love
my
being
favorite
able
words
to.
earlier of
Ooh.
boundaries.
You are the boundaries queen. I knew you were gonna
Uh,
latch onto that one.
I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm gonna make a note. Like, so again, yeah, you know me, I love boundaries, one of my favorite words. You've brought up a really good point before of like how sometimes it can be hard to balance like authenticity with boundaries and how even like early in your earlier example, you were like you're there's like this board meeting where these multiple voices can
Hmm.
kind of feel like, well, I want this boundary. Oh, but then this might happen. Oh, but this. And it's like these competing
Hmm.
things within ourselves. So can you just tell us a little bit more about maybe like your experience with like that difficulty or how maybe others find that balance to be maybe like sounding maybe easier than it actually is.
1000%. I would love to because I'm work in progress in the
Oh,
boundaries
same. I
department.
love
And
boundaries and I'm a
so
work in progress.
I think that's the first part to acknowledge is it's usually going to be a work in progress.
Yeah.
And kind of I love, yeah, thinking about that balance because, I think first to kind of answer that, I have to think about what does authenticity mean to me?
Mm.
What does when I think of authenticity, you know, I'm a big Merriam-Webster person. So in preparation for this podcast, I did look up to see what Merriam-Webster had to say
Oh, I'm
about
obsessed.
authenticity. And I could kind of like feel it, but it's very clear and concise. I love their definition. It said true to one's own personality, spirit, or character.
Hmm.
And so I think, being authentic also means the ability to kind of be introspective with yourself
Hmm.
because the way my personality, spirit, or character sometimes changes on the day to day on the based on the capacity that I have.
Yep.
And so when I think about boundaries, the first kind of thing I think about too is being authentic of what who do I want to show up as,
Hmm.
who do I want to, and really what do I want to bring to every situation I'm in, and then also too I think flexibility. I think
Yeah.
usually when people hear boundaries they're like, no, it has to be firm.
Hmm.
And yes, there is a firmness that has to happen for us to keep our boundaries, and the boundary I have day to day might shift. There might be weeks where I'm getting good sleep,
Yep.
I don't have really a lot of extra outside of life thing happen where I can see you at 5. I
Hmm.
usually my contract hours are 8 to 5, and I know that you need it, and I'm going to be able to show up there. And so because I have the capacity, yes,
Yep.
I would like to do that. And so I think balancing that, it's first like knowing where do I really want to show up, because then that's the picture that can be on the screen when the board members are meeting. They're like, "Oh, okay, if it lines up with
Yeah.
this can feel in alignment." And sometimes that's really hard because sometimes there is two pictures that are really strongly
Mhm.
like, I want to be the therapist that is able this week to work at 5
Yeah.
and see you at 5. And then sometimes we're humans. Like we are
Mm.
humans helping other humans. And I
Mhm.
just don't really have that. I just
Yep.
don't, I don't have that. And so I think first it's like knowing kind of and it's always a lifelong journey to figure out who our authentic self is. And so I think knowing where you are on that journey, knowing your capacity of balancing that, and then and also, being able to communicate that, I think is sometimes really hard because my lovely individual therapist calls it overing. She was like, "You like over explain, you over like." I have such wise women in my life that are like, "Listen, no, it's a complete sentence. Like you don't have to say no because or I can't because like
Yeah.
I can't do that."
Yeah.
Right? And so it's balancing that, figuring out who you are and
Mhm.
then working from there. And I think the beautiful, difficult, messy sometimes part of finding our boundaries is I laughed. I kind of chuckled when you were asking the question because you were like, tell me about your journey with this. And I was like, well, I have, I think, a lot more missteps than I do successes. And one of those things for me is sometimes I get a little like speedy with the response. I think that I have
Mm,
to respond right now.
mhm,
And I don't give myself that time and space to
mm,
assess. Sometimes it's assessing my capacity. Sometimes it's
yeah,
assessing my pocketbook, right? It's like you're asking me to kind of go here or do this. Like, do I really have the money for that?
yeah.
And that's hard because I
That's a
love,
boundary, yeah.
yeah. And sometimes, and a lot of sometimes I commit.
Yeah,
Sometimes I commit to things, and I think the most common pattern on my boundary with journey or my journey with boundaries
yeah.
is committing and then feeling that like feeling after where you're like, oh,
Mm,
girl, why did you commit to that? You don't have the capacity in lots of areas for this right now. And I think for me, the reason I did it is because I still, it's always a journey with
mhm,
how are they going to think about me? If
mm,
I say no,
mhm,
is that person going to respond? How's that person going to respond? And
mhm,
so, again, weaving kind of what we talked about earlier, I really do have to sometimes think about my attachment style.
mhm.
She's an anxiously attached girly over here. And so sometimes I get that, like, if I say no,
Right.
right, then they're not going to. When I know a lot of the times I'm setting boundaries with the people we love, where it's like, yeah, saying no to an event or something is usually not going
Mhm.
to cause, what I think it's going to. And so I think it's beautiful and messy and hard. And there's so much tied in with
Yeah.
making boundaries. And then also it's a skill like anything else. I think sometimes people think you're either a boundary person or you're not. And it's
Mhm.
like, no, like we can
There's a
all learn.
lot of in
There's a
between there.
yes, yes. I hope that
Uh,
answered your question. I think it may have gotten a little
no, I loved it. I loved
around. Okay, good.
everything, and I'm just like cosign like everything, like because yes, it's a journey. It's messy. It's these competing parts of us at times. It's slowing it down. It's even just I love what you said about like the missteps, even because it's like to me. That's part of the journey is, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
recovering perfectionist. And so it's like, I'm going to do boundaries perfectly. I'm going to do healing perfectly. And it's like, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
not how that works though. It's
Yeah.
you do some trial and error. You find what works for you. What works one day may not work a different day. And it's instead of
Mm-hmm.
labeling us, come back to those labels and those kind of messages we tell ourselves of, oh my gosh, I'm so bad at this. I'm not a boundary person. Oh, all these awful things that it can start spiraling. It's, hey, what can I learn from this? Maybe this
Yeah.
didn't work for me, or maybe it wasn't really in line, or part of me thought that, this was what it was going to look like, but actually maybe I was not listening to this other part of me. And we
Yeah.
can learn and grow. And it's not always gonna be this, like, nice little linear, like, "I did a boundary, yay, tomorrow I can set another boundary." Like, sometimes we're gonna go backwards sometimes.
Absolutely. And I've never been more motivated to set boundaries than when I didn't have a boundary and now I'm feeling the consequences.
Yeah.
It's like, well, 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 if it isn't the consequences of my own actions
Yeah.
coming and telling me that now I've got to, get ready or go here or
Yep.
do this or whatever, because I committed to doing that. And I think with
Mhm.
boundaries too, and weaving in authenticity, one of the things that I do hold close is because I struggled with this for a long period of my life is keeping my commitments. If I tell
Mhm.
you I'm going to be there, barring, sickness or emergency or things like that, I hope you know that I'm going to show up.
Yeah.
I hope my clients know that when you book a session with me, I'm going to be there and I'm
Yeah.
going to show up and give you, and thinking about boundaries too, I think in assessing capacity, it is too assessing. I want all of my clients to leave feeling seen and heard
Mhm.
and like they had a good session.
Mhm.
And so I have to ask myself, am I capable of giving them that? Because
Mhm.
my spirit and character I want to be is someone who shows up and does that for my client. And so
Yeah.
if I can't bring that to the table that day, then maybe the answer is, canceling a session or
Yeah.
rescheduling a session because I'm not going to be able to show up as my authentic self.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm never more motivated to set boundaries until I feel those moments where, oof, I committed to doing this session and I'm showing up, but I'm not as equipped as I would like to be, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I loved how you phrased that too, because it's like I can almost imagine, like an earlier version of myself stuck with that choice of, okay, I'm feeling some sort of way, my head's maybe not in the game, like I really want to, meet with this client. Or sometimes we get pressure from the places that we work at or something where it's
Absolutely.
like you just have to, we're almost like machines. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, but now I'm a human. And like if I really look at my capacity and my authenticity and my hopes for those sessions is I want to be able to give myself to those clients. I want them to feel heard
Mhm.
and understood. That requires certain energy. Am I going to be able to do that? And sometimes that's saying, no, I can't. And that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. That doesn't mean I'm a bad therapist. That doesn't mean I'm weak. I'm not cut out for this. It means I'm human first. And
Yeah.
sometimes saying no. And they might be upset that they have to have a canceled session. But in the grand scheme of things, I know that that's going to be what's maybe best for me in that moment. And honestly, probably what's going to be best for the therapy relationship. Because I could probably do like a half ass session, but is that going to feel good to me? Probably not.
Exactly, and we're humans working with other humans, so you better bet when I'm not like I normally am, and usually when you're not like you normally are, our clients pick up on that.
Oh,
Our
yeah.
clients pick up on that, and, a part of being a therapist is being able to fluctuate energy. I'm sure you do a session where we're talking about fun stuff, someone's having a good day, and we're
Yeah.
really matching that energy, and we're really giving it to them, and then our next session, maybe someone's having
Mhm.
a really terrible day. And
Mhm.
so the ability to adjust our energy to meet people where they are requires a lot of energy in us ourselves. And
Yep.
so it is assessing, do I have the energy to fluctuate my
Mhm.
energy all day? Right?
Yep.
Like, do I have the energy to meet people where they are?
Yep.
And I think that you acknowledged a really important part is yes, a lot of this is all well and good. And we have to acknowledge that sometimes we are in systems that
Mhm.
do require things that don't match our capacity at that
Mhm.
moment. And then I think you answered okay, well, what do you do about that? And it is, we're humans with humans. Like we have to be
Mhm.
human and say, hey, it's important to me that I showed up today.
Mhm.
And I sometimes will put it out there like, hey, I showed up today and I'm a little tired today.
Mhm.
But I want you to know that the change in my energy does not reflect anything about
Yeah.
you. I'm not listening. I'm not bored during your session.
Mhm.
I'm not, and it's being honest about where we're at. Like, this
Yep.
is my authentic self today,
Yep.
right? Addison authentically is tired today. And so
Yep.
it's putting that out there and saying, you know what, but I'm going to give you the best I've got. And if at
Oh,
any
yeah.
moment you
Yeah.
need something else, let's talk about it.
Exactly. And I think that too, like that models it, right? Because I think sometimes
Yeah.
people think like as therapists, we have to almost like be fixed, quote unquote, or like be perfect. And it's like, no,
Hmm.
like our clients are coming to us. They're not there to like make the hour about us. So if I'm, not having 100% day, I'm not gonna be like, oh my gosh, like let me tell you everything. But it's okay to
Yeah.
say, like, you know what, I'm here today. It's kind of gloomy out, I'm kind of missing the
Hmm.
sunshine. And then that gives them permission to be like, oh, you don't have it all put together. I don't have to have it all put
Yes.
together either. Like I
Yes.
can then say, yeah, this time of year really does kind of drain the energy from me. And I am noticing that I'm tired more. And it's like, cool.
Yeah.
That's what we can now talk about. Like, you don't have to put on this perfect facade. I
Yeah.
don't have it all together. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, and I love that. Some of my favorite, and I am so grateful. I have gotten to work with so many wonderful therapists throughout my life. And some of the best sessions I have had is when I knew that they were human too. When
Yes.
I knew that they were not sitting in front of me like, I am together. And they
Right.
would never say anything like, I'm together and you are not. But right, like when
Right.
I love that I've been able to have therapists who were human with me, yes, in that
Mhm.
way that no, we're not doing the counter transference thing where we're
Right.
coming in. It's like, hey, listen, I know you're 9, but I'm having a hard day and
Right.
I need you to give me some therapy, right?
Yeah.
But it is being honest. And I love
Mhm.
that, yes, that does model it for them
Mhm.
because I that's how we learn. We learn by watching someone else do it and then watching someone else do it and then it being okay.
Yeah, it
And then
creates
it
safety to then let
yeah,
them acknowledge some of those things or to let some of those walls down and not feel like they have to put
absolutely.
on a performance for us because, oh, well, we have it all together. You should too. Like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
I saw a TikTok today that's like, your therapist is probably the most unhinged person you know. And I was like, that's
I
relatable.
adore that. Yeah, I love that. I actually did a new intake a little while ago and I loved that the parent came in and said, "Hey," because I always ask, "Hey, we're going to do this. This is kind of the outline. There's going to be some questions here. I'm going to ask you. There's going to be some places for you to answer kind of more open questions. And then I just like to add at the end, is there anything that you want to ask me? Is there
Mhm.
anything that's important for you to know about me? And she said, are you seeing someone of your own? And
Mhm.
I loved that because I
Yep.
was like,
Heck
yes,
yeah.
it's so important for us because, yes, right, we don't have it all together. And for me, sometimes I'm so grateful, and I never thought this would happen for a lot of years of my life, but the most difficult years of my life are the most valuable
Mm.
some of the most valuable tools that I have when I come into session. It is the most inspiring moment for me sometimes when I can share something that I have now healed from with a
Mhm.
client in a way to relate to them. And then
Yeah.
like to see that moment of like, oh, my
You get
therapist
it.
too.
Yeah.
Yes, is so wonderful. And it's
Yep.
such a gift to
Yep.
have that
It
and
provides
know like,
understanding, it provides hope of
yes,
like, hey, like you're not just saying, you read this book and so you get it. And it's also
right.
hey, like yes, our experiences maybe are different, but I have some of these
Hmm.
similar emotions or I've gone through similar things and
Yeah.
I was able to with a trusted person be able to
Hmm.
heal and grow. And it's like, oh, maybe this doesn't have to last forever. Like if you can do it, maybe I can
Yeah.
do it. And even if it's just that word maybe, like that provides a little bit of like, ooh, I got this kind of
Hmm.
thing. I love that.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Awesome for sure.
I think we could talk for forever, but you know me, I'm very boundaried, and so I want to be respectful
Love.
of your time. But I do like to end asking everyone how you have been practicing authenticity lately.
I love this question. I'm gonna be a little introspective about it for a moment. I think one of the ways is keeping up the routines that help me continue to be authentic, right? I think, going to therapy regularly.
Mm,
I have a village of women in my life who share similar values that I do and who really hold me accountable. And so I think
mm,
connecting with those people, continuing to go to individual therapy, continuing to grow, and then also just self-care, right? I
yeah.
know that's such a therapist, like, yeah, self-care, but I really mean that of I think taking care of ourselves and giving us space and
Mm,
time to be with ourselves. I think we live in an era where even on our cell phones, like I love TikTok as much as the
mm-hmm.
next person. And taking some quiet time
Yeah.
away from my phone
Yeah.
to, go outside, go on a walk with my dogs,
Mm,
even just sit
mm-hmm.
outside for a second and just be is connecting with myself. And that helps me, going back to the, authenticity being true to one's
Yeah.
spirit and character. I gotta connect with my spirit and character sometimes to be able to do that. And so having those quiet moments of connection
Mm.
is one of the ways that I'm practicing that today.
Heck yeah. Oh, that's inspiring me of just it helps like slow it down, right? Because so much of
Hmm.
us in our day to day are busy and we're going from one thing to another. And yeah, it's easy to kind of like be scrolling and just that reminder of just being, even if it's for a couple of moments, but it just
Hmm.
can help with that going inwards and what do I really need? What do I want to present myself? What am I valuing? Am I in line with these things? It just sounds really intentional.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, well, Addison, you are just a joy. I love
Oh,
talking to you. I'm
thank
so thankful
you.
that you are in my life, and I'm so excited for folks to be able to hear more about just this journey of authenticity and that just like the permission that you're modeling of like it's okay to, if it doesn't look perfect all the time and that there's hope and there are these
Yes.
wonderful things out there and you're doing amazing work. So, thank you for chatting with me today.
It was absolutely a privilege. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful you're in my life too, because yes, we could talk for hours and hours, but I'm so grateful that we got to do this because this is such an amazing, and it's important to have other people to connect with who know what you're going through on a day to day as a helping professional. So I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you are the best. Well, folks, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, the world needs the real you. So let's explore that authenticity together.